Hi everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the October Shimmerz Paints Color Kitz collection. For this layout, I'm starting out with the cut file. There are actually two cut files for October, but I picked this spider web because I really love making Halloween layouts in general, and spider webs are one of my favorite elements to include on my October pages. I cut it out of some white cardstock, and then I used some black hole color splash to make it black. I didn't want to use a piece of black cardstock, so I wanted a little bit of variation in the color. And then I was thinking that it might look nice to add some glossy accents to the cut file to give it a little bit of shine. And I'm tracing along each of these little sections of the spider web, trying not to run my hand over the parts that I already applied the glossy accents to. Once I was done, I put this to the side and allowed it to dry thoroughly. I did check it several times to make sure that it wasn't gluing itself down to the glass mat, because if that happened, then it would be impossible to get it off the mat. So I did check it a few times and just make sure that nothing was sticking to the mat. So now I'm going to back the cut file. I'm not going to back the entire thing. I'm just going to back, I guess you could say, every other space. And I'm using a bit of a pattern. I'm going to use a black and white pattern with spider webs and spiders for the outside ring. Again, only filling in every other spot. And then for the second, I guess you would call it a row in, I'm using a black and white stripe. And then the next row is a really cute pattern paper that has ghosts on it and says boo. And then the next layer in from that is cats with little moons. And then for those very tiny spaces in the center, I repeated the pattern paper that has the ghosts on it. And in the end, you don't see that center part because it gets covered up with the photo and the embellishments. And now I'm beginning to work on my background. I'm just going to be using paint on this background, no modeling paste or any other types of media. I'm using my usual 120-pound smooth white cardstock that has been coated with Liquitex gesso. I'm using the packaging technique, and I'm spreading some of the Shimmerz paint around the background. I'm using the two different colors of orange that were included in the October kit. I'm using a Creameez called My Clementine. That's that really pretty kind of lightish orange. You could see it in the little pan to the right of my layout. And then I also use a Vibez called Punkin Oie. And I combined those two colors to make a very orange, kind of a circle on my background. So I use the packaging technique not only for the Creameez, but also for the Vibez. And you can see that I am working to make this circle just a little bit bigger. And I continue to trial my cut file over the top just to make sure that I have the color where I want it. And now I'm adding some splatters. And I add quite a few of them to the background, and I extend them a little bit past the area where I have the large area of color. So after I was done with adding the color to the background, I was really happy that I left some holes or some open areas in the cut file, because I like the way the paint kind of peeking through the cut file ended up looking. But you'll see that in a little while. And I want to remember to tell you before the end of the video that if you use my name in the comments when you place your order with Shimmerz Paints, you'll receive a free gift. So my background is dry, but I was thinking I should add a little bit more of the My Clementine color. So you could see that once again, I am adding it to the background using the packaging technique. I really love adding the layers of color. And for me, when I look at the finished product, I can see the two different shades of orange, and I'm really happy that I incorporated both of them on the background. And before I'm done adding paint to the background, I was thinking I should add a few splatters of the My Clementine. So I add a little bit more water, and I'm using an old bristle brush, and I add quite a few splatters, and then I never seem to be happy with how many splatters I add. I always want to add more. So I'm back again with the Punkin Oie, adding some of that to the area of color. And it's funny how it looks like nothing right now, but I feel like it looks so much better when the cut file is layered on top. So I wanted to add some touches to the edge of the paper. So for this layout, I was thinking that since it's a Halloween layout, it would look kind of cool if I added some black brush strokes, very loose, rough brush strokes around the edge. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm once again using the black hole color splash, and I'm painting kind of roughly and randomly all around the edge. I also wanted to add some black splatters to my background, so I'm once again using the black hole for that. The splatters are very small and they are nice and dark. The color splash is a very rich paint. You can get some really deep colors with it. And then I also thought I would add another kind of layer all around the outside just to make that color a little bit darker and the edge a little bit more noticeable. And you can see that I'm trying not to be particular, just kind of throwing the color down because I really wanted it to not look planned. I wanted it to look rough and a little bit random. So initially, I kept the strokes parallel with the edge of the paper, and then I was thinking it might look kind of cool if I just add a couple of strokes going the other way. So that's what I did. Again, I tried to be as random as possible. I just wanted to give the edge kind of a grungy look that I think works really well for a Halloween layout. So after I was done adding those second brush strokes, or the brush strokes going in the other direction, I went back in for yet another round of the black splatters. You can see here I'm using my scissors and I'm tapping that against the plastic that holds the little straw, and that helps to make the splatters a little bit smaller. So now I'm going to use this awesome sheet that comes with the kit. You can color it in and have a whole page of ephemera or a whole bunch of ephemera. And the great thing is that you could choose whatever colors that you want, whatever colors are going to coordinate with your layout. And I really like that about these sheets. And look how great these images are. I love those cute little ghosts. But I'm going to have a witch themed layout, and I also have my spider web. So I chose things like the witch's cauldron and the potion bottle, and then I also included some of your usual fare for Halloween. I love having bats on my page, and I thought the spider went really well with the spider web. And then I'm also going to include the really cute little stack of jack-o'-lanterns with the bat on top, and I paint the pumpkins, the candle, and the star too. I mainly use the colors that were included in the October kit, but I also use a couple of other Shimmerz paints that were included in past kits. So I added in the colorings called No Yoking. That's a yellow color. I love that color. I use that all the time. And then I also used some different shades of green. And then I use those same different shades of green to paint the edge of this paper, which I'm going to use as a mat for my photo. So I used a color splash called Once Upon a Time, and I also used a Vibez called Beach Glass, and I kind of mixed those together, and I think that made a nice color green for my background. So now I'm ready to attach down my spider web cut file. I'm really happy with the way the Glossy Accents looks. I think it just adds a nice little touch and highlights the cut file. And I'm using Aleene's gel glue. I think that's the glue that I use the most in my scrapbooking. And then I'm pressing that web down, making sure that the whole thing is going to stick, especially at those edges. And later on, I'm going to add a little bit of ATG adhesive just at the little points, just to make sure that the edges of the spider web are going to stay attached down to the layout. So here's my photo. It's a picture of both of my daughters quite a few years ago when we were in Salem, Massachusetts. And the name of this witch is Bora. Bora is a very well-known figure in Salem. And I noticed that this year she has a huge cauldron. She's really like upgraded her accessories, and it's very cool. It was very large. I wonder how she manages to get that onto Essex Street, where all of the characters kind of come together. Because it is so large. But in any case, this was from quite a few years ago. I started to add some embellishments to my layout, and then I was thinking that the photo needed a little bit of something else. So I was thinking I could use those same papers that I used to back the cut file, and I could add some kind of wonky-ish mats behind the photo. I'm not matting the whole photo with any one piece of paper. I'm just kind of piecing together the different patterns behind the photo. So I used a paper that had some very thick black stripes on it. I liked the way that one was very bold. And then I used this orange paper. And this was great because it was a little bit different from the background, but it matched in really well. And then I also used this black and white striped paper, which I also used to back the cut file. And I'm just attaching all those papers down a little bit here and there just to create some layers and interest behind the photo. And I like that a lot better than the photo when it was just plain. So I attached my photo down, and I had already put 2 pumpkins in the lower right hand corner, but I was kind of thinking that it looked a little bit too heavy. I'm going to leave it there for a moment, but I'm going to end up removing one of those pumpkins so that it doesn't look like there's so much in that one corner. So I'm adding a number of the images that I painted earlier. One of them is the potion bottle that has the little skull in it. And there was also a witch's cauldron, which I thought would be a great match for this layout. So even though it was part of a bigger piece, I decided I was going to cut off the cauldron and the 2 candles and the ooze underneath and just use that part of it. It's great the way you can change things and alter them to what you need them for or how you need them to look. I have 3 bats in the upper left-hand corner, and I'm also including this star that I painted green up there. And then I'm attaching down those jack-o'-lanterns with that cute little bat on top. And I'm trying to find places for the cauldron and the potion bottle. And they get moved around a little bit, but they eventually find their homes around the photo. And now I'm ready to start attaching some of these pieces down. So I'm using my ATG adhesive. And now I'm using a flare marker because there's a black outline around the rest of this cauldron. But because I cut part of it off, I wanted to complete the black outline, so I use my marker to do that. And this is where I remove one of the pumpkins from the lower right hand corner, and I ended up putting that pumpkin right on top of the photo, and then I had to rearrange some of the bats since I added that pumpkin up there. And then each month we get a set of 3 dots. Those are kind of epoxy circles with images that match the collection. And so there was a really cute spider, and I thought that would be perfect to add to the cluster to the right of the photo. And then I wanted to add a title that was purple, so I added that in the upper right hand corner using some Bo Bunny letter stickers that I had in my stash. They're probably super old, but the color I thought went well with the layout, and I decided that instead of putting them in a straight line, I would stagger them. I also used some ghosts from the ephemera pack on this layout. I have one of the ghosts to the left of the cauldron by the photo, and then I also put one behind the pumpkin on the lower right hand corner. And I really liked the way that third ghost looked behind the title. I think that it was nice because it made that visual triangle of the 3 ghosts, and I always like to add a little something to embellish the title. I don't want it to be all by itself. So I use a very, very tiny strip of that black striped paper, and then I place the spider on the bottom of it to look like the spider is hanging from its web coming down from the title. And then I added a whole bunch of jewels, and I added those all over the layout. I put a whole bunch on the web. I also put some on the letter stickers. I used some orange, some purple, and some green jewels, and I incorporated jewels that were different sizes and also slightly different shades of the same color. And for the cauldron, I added a couple of different sizes and shades of green so they would look like the bubbles in the cauldron. And then I also added some of those jewels to the cluster in the bottom right-hand corner and then to the eyes of the bats in the upper left-hand corner. And I just really love those touches. I think that those are the kinds of things that can make a whole layout come together. And I also added some photo corners. There were only 3 corners visible, so I punched those corners out of that same strip of striped paper that I used for the little string coming down from the spider. And you can see that here that I'm adding some more jewels. Those are green jewels that I'm adding now, and the jewels that I had were on that sheet in a couple of different sizes. I put an orange one in the center of the candle, and those were the very last touches, and the layout is complete. So thank you so much for watching this video. I think I'm coming down with a little something, so sorry if my voice sounds a little bit different, but I hope that you did enjoy the video. I really enjoyed working with the Shimmerz Color Kitz collection from October. I love October. I love Halloween layouts, and so I'm always excited to see their October kit. And I think there are still a couple of kits left, I think maybe 2. If you want to check out the link in the description and you're interested, you can order a kit on the Shimmerz website. Thanks again so much for watching, and have a fantastic day, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.